200 soldiers will live in this city beneath the ice. The Cold War is heating up, and the US wants to show the Soviets just what its military is capable of.
I really didn't have a clue what to expect. I only knew that the US Army had built it.
A nuclear reactor is to provide the underground town with heat and electricity.
You have a nuclear reactor and you have to live close to it and you never know what happens.
But the underground settlement is merely cover for a far crazier and top-secret American military project.
Known as Project Iceworm, that involved to have nuclear missiles installed.
After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union grapple for supremacy. It's a race marked by new technology and ever more lethal weaponry. The Cold War between East and West is underway. The Red Army uses the May Day parade to showcase its new military technology. The Soviet Union has just carried out the first successful intercontinental missile tests, leaving American efforts in the dust. To drive back the communist threat, Eisenhower adopts a policy of nuclear deterrence.
May the turbulence of our age yield to the true time of peace, when men and nations shall share a life that honors the dignity of each.
The US sets its sights on Greenland. Situated halfway between Washington and Moscow, American missiles could hit their Soviet targets with much greater accuracy.
The US government, people were beginning to realize that the Arctic areas would play a crucial role in the new Cold War. And for that reason, they thought it would be much easier if they controlled Greenland completely.
But Greenland belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark. The Danes reject the American offer, but approve the construction of a large US airbase. The airbase is built in secret, and the Air Force has trouble finding enough personnel willing to live in this remote part of the world. Chuck Rose, a military doctor, is sent to serve his country in this freezing wasteland.
And said, I just got my orders. It says, I'm going to Thule Air Base. Where's that? And the sergeant that answered the phone, he started laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. I said, what's so funny? He says, that's the worst place in the world. He says, you're going to live under the ice for a whole year and you'll never get out and see the sun.
In 1959, however, the United States begins an even more complex project, not far from Thule. They call it Camp Century. At this new site, the US will carry out tests on people and material needed in the deployment of nuclear missiles. The US Army invests enormous sums of money and resources in the first ever subterranean military base in the Arctic. Supply shipments are soon crawling up the freshly laid road towards the ice cap, where they are transferred to sleds and sent onwards to Camp Century. The whole operation is filmed in color. This footage will later be shown to the public to trumpet the strength and capabilities of the American military.
We call these convoys of 10 and 20-ton sleds heavy swings. Crawling up the ice cap at approximately 2 miles an hour, a heavy swing would reach the camp in about 70 hours if everything went well. Caterpillar tractors with extra wide treads pulled the heavy swings. Each tractor could pull from 50 to 100 tons. Finally, like a wagon train in the Old West, the first heavy swing got underway.
It is still officially summer when the harsh Arctic winter sets in. Construction will soon be put on hold. Fortunately, the workers already have somewhere to meet, sleep, and relax. Camp Century will be built around 100 feet below the surface. The glacier underneath is nearly a mile thick. The engineers build the tunnel system from above. To do so, they must first dig 23 separate trenches. In the middle, the main trench, with channels branching off to the side for the accommodations and various technical facilities. A small nuclear reactor will provide the settlement with electricity and heat. The snowplows have been brought in from Switzerland, where they are used to clear the alpine passes during winter. At Camp Century, they dig further and further into the snow. In a matter of hours, metal arches are added to provide the tunnels with sturdy roofs. These are then covered in snow to disguise them from the outside world. The builders work around the clock in 12-hour shifts. Thanks to the Arctic summer, this is easily done. The nighttime is just as bright as the day. Due to the constant sunlight, the workers are plagued by headaches and sleeplessness. The army feeds its soldiers well. Every day, they get double-sized portions to keep their spirits up. 100 men live together in the construction camp, which will have to be dismantled once the subterranean town is finally complete. In summer 1960, the soldiers start building the camp's interior. On a foundation made from wooden planks, prefab houses, designed especially for Arctic conditions, are assembled. Each house was put together and tested back in the USA. They are heatable and specially insulated. Each kit can be assembled in a day. The temperature inside the ice tunnels is around -22 degrees Fahrenheit. And it must remain so for the tunnels to stay intact. The openings are walled off with blocks of snow. This ensures Camp Century is completely invisible to the outside world. The blocks support each other, stabilizing the wall. A narrow entranceway allows people in and out. Each tunnel has an emergency shaft. The exits are the only part of Camp Century that can be seen above ground. The Marine Fiddler, a supply ship, docks in Thule. She brings with her the pieces for a nuclear reactor. Unlike the prefab houses, however, it has not been tested beforehand. The first assembling and tests will take place once it reaches Camp Century.
The vapor container, the largest single item in the power plant, was carried on a special flat-bottom sled built expressly for its transport. Everything seemed fine the morning the heavy swing moved out. But unfortunately, it was only a few hours later that one of the worst storms of the season blew up.
During the journey, winter sets in again. Getting everything ready on time becomes a race against the clock. September 1960. The soldiers in Camp Century are working flat out in 14-hour shifts. Fortunately, the steel housing for the nuclear reactor is almost complete. Due to the storm, the heavy swing needs longer than planned to reach the camp. It takes over a week to make the 120-mile journey from Thule. Its arrival at Camp Century is eagerly awaited.
You have a nuclear reactor and you have to live close to it and you never know what happens. I don't think that's a very nice feeling. I mean, they didn't know what nuclear power was and they thought of a nuclear bomb or something that could explode any time, right? So that's why they didn't feel so great about it. And when they installed the nuclear reactor, there was a radiation problem. So they measured radiation in the tunnel, and this radiation was far too high. It was unacceptably high. And so they shut it down. and this is during winter time, right? But they asked for big lead plates so they could have sort of a lead shielding a wall around it. They started it up again, and this is when Søren Gregersen was there. You must ask him.
The army sees to it that life in the construction site is captured on film, especially the fun side. The documentary footage will be shown on American television screens as soon as possible. The army wants to show how far it will go to protect the American public, even in the most inhospitable corners of the world.
They thought that if for some reason the nuclear threat to continental homeland USA would be too high, then people might want to live in these protected cities under the ice or in other places. At least that's how it was presented.
In October 1960, two young men, both Boy Scouts, arrive in Thule. One of them is Søren. Both have been chosen for public relations work and will spend the winter as military technical assistants in Camp Century.
Man kan jo ikke sige, at jeg vidste noget om.
I really didn't have a clue what to expect. I only knew that the US Army had built it and that a few people were living there. These are my memories of Camp Century and my diary.
It says in Danish, mandag den 12. December.
Monday, 12th of December 1960. Breakfast in the reactor zone. The swing transport has just arrived at the camp. We received the order to bring the food down into the main tunnel. After lunch, back to the control room.
Efter lunch opholdt vi os lidt i kontrolrum. I guess I was, maybe you could say it, naive enough to say this is very exciting. There is a nuclear power plant very close to where I'm living. And it meant it was supposed to be beyond radiation danger. And that is what we are getting of words. And I took that. I have simply accepted that we are going to be protected and things are being measured around us so that it is shown that this is not dangerous.
Søren Gregersen suffers no long-term health effects, despite his involvement in the radiation testing. To this day, he believes that the radiation levels around the reactor were safe. Each fuel rod, containing a pound of uranium-235, was carefully unpacked and cleaned by hand. For modern audiences, this footage is disturbing, as is the apparent lack of protective clothing. In January 1961, a new American president takes the oath of office. John F. Kennedy inherits a difficult legacy. He must contain the Soviet Union without provoking a new world war. He swears to
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
The communists have a special surprise for the new commander-in-chief. The Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human to journey into space. In April 1961, Gagarin's capsule Vostok 1 completes one orbit of the Earth. The spaceflight lasts 108 minutes. 108 minutes that changed the world. The USA responds with a giant submarine building program. And like the Soviets, they expand their nuclear missile capabilities. They focus on missiles that can be launched from submarines traveling on the high seas. Now it's the Americans' turn to take the lead in the arms race. The USA sends the Nautilus to the North Pole, the world's first nuclear submarine. Parallel to the Navy, the Air Force also gets a nuclear missile, the Minuteman. And there are plans for a similar rocket called Iceman to be stationed in Greenland under the ice. Before transferring any rockets to their launch pads, the scientists in Camp Century have to study the physical challenges involved. For this purpose, they build and test an underground railway track.
Camp Century was the runner-up project for a much larger project known as Project Iceworm that involved building many thousand kilometers of tunnels under the inland ice to have nuclear missiles installed.
Søren Gregersen takes 3 photos of these railway tracks beneath the ice. The only proof of the top-secret nuclear arms project known as Iceworm. Camp Century becomes a testing site for numerous experiments, both military and civilian. Glaciologists extract one of the world's first ice core samples from deep inside a glacier, a fascinating archive of past climates. Søren takes part in many of these tests. The US soldiers study everything about their Arctic habitat, even testing hovercraft as a means of transport.
Project Iceworm was evaluated by the Department of Defense in 1962 under the Kennedy administration. And we know that this evaluation, even though it was favorable, the Department of Defense in the end said no to Project Iceworm.
After only a few years in operation, Camp Century is close to collapse. Despite the insulation, the heat coming from the houses is causing problems for the structure of the tunnels. The shifting glaciers also play their part. The piles of snow can no longer be cleared by hand.
The ice cap is not a solid piece of ice. It's quite dynamic in fact, so it moves all the time. It flows from the middle of the ice cap and towards the oceans. And this movement caused the tunnels of Camp Century to deform and eventually collapse.
In 1966, the US Army has to abandon Camp Century. The Army take their nuclear reactor with them as they leave, but everything else remains, to be fossilized forever under the ice. But in an era of unprecedented climate change, there is no forever anymore. Greenland's ice caps are melting, with repercussions for the entire world. But the melting ice is also bringing to light some long-forgotten secrets. According to climate predictions, the impact of Camp Century may yet be felt, 50 years after the project was consigned to the past. When Camp Century was abandoned, most of the radioactive waste was left behind, with other toxic byproducts such as PCBs and vast quantities of diesel. Scientific forecasts predict that by the end of this century, a moving glacier could carry all this waste towards the bay near Thule. The Swiss glaciologist Horst Mahkut was, together with the Canadian researcher William Colgan, the first scientist to point out the environmental risks posed by Camp Century. In 2017, Denmark caved to pressure from Greenland and sent an international expedition to investigate the claims. Mahkut joined the researchers on their trip. A chartered plane drops the scientists at the spot where Camp Century once stood. They spend 2 weeks here, studying the ice around the abandoned site. From above, there is no trace of the settlement left. The tunnels and houses are buried under 60 years of snowfall.
Everything is still there, but because it's up to 200 feet under the ground and buried under at least 100 feet of snow, it's all as flat as a pancake.
The glaciologists record data about the snowmelt and measure the underground layers with a radar, which they pull behind them on skis. This way, they can locate the toxic waste stored under the ice. They then extract ice samples from 200 feet below the surface in order to test them for radioactivity. What will happen in the next 70 years? Will Camp Century free itself from its icy grave and end up in the sea near Thule? Studies show that the ice around the camp is indeed getting warmer, but dangerous levels of radioactivity have not yet been discovered. It will take further research expeditions and clear answers from Copenhagen, if indeed they ever come. While the authorities have published scientific data online, interview requests have been turned down, and the leaders of the expedition have been forbidden to talk about their findings. Denmark's silence on the matter means that the truth around Camp Century remains shrouded in secrecy, as does the missile research project known as Iceworm, which was carried out at the camp, but whose details are classified by the US government. But for better or worse, the melting of the ice caps will keep Camp Century in the public eye for years to come. And it's an achievement that should not be forgotten. The first ever human settlement built under the ice that accomplished what it was designed for, at least for 6 whole years.